Chapter 1 Introduction Shining a Light into the Darkest Places. PTSD won't kill you, but not talking about it might. Dr. Jody Carrington. I knew it as soon as I woke up that day. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I was exhausted. I had woken up multiple times during the night because of nightmares, where I was reliving traumatic calls from my experiences as a cop. What I knew was that the mandatory return to work psychological evaluation that I was required to attend that day would not go well. What I didn't know was how they would tell me that I failed my exam. The psychologist, himself a former police officer, was very nice about how he handled the situation. He didn't tell me directly that I had failed my psychological assessment. Instead, what he said was, "Mark, how about if you come back and see me again sometime in a month or two?" Truthfully, it was a statement that was disguised as a question. What he was actually saying with his question was, "I'm not willing to clear your return to work. You need more time before you're ready to try another psychological assessment." Looking back, I appreciate what he did. It was hard to hear his evaluation, but he was right. He handled it in a caring and thoughtful way, which meant I felt less stigma about my experience. This was an important distinction because I already carried so much mental health stigma. The kind of things I would say to myself in my own head were terrible. I was already suffering from symptoms of traumatic stress. The shame that I placed on myself about my experiences only made it worse. My mind would replay statements like, "What the fuck is wrong with me? Men don't cry. How can you be so weak?" I was so hard on myself because I felt ashamed in a deeply emotional way that I was experiencing symptoms of mental health problems from traumatic events as a police officer. What I was experiencing was unique for me, but it was a pattern of similar experiences that many police officers and many people outside of policing have experienced. It was traumatic stress. It was the effects of vicarious trauma and emotional pain. It was a psychological injury. I suffered alone and in silence for many years. I broke down crying uncontrollably when I thought about my painful experiences. I would explode with rage over the most minor things. The kind of rage where you scream at the top of your lungs. The kind of rage that you can barely control. I desperately needed help, but I would not accept help. I didn't understand what was happening. I lacked the education and awareness to understand mental health and psychology. I spent years suffering from traumatic events in my dreams without understanding that it was a sign of traumatic stress. I didn't know about the changes in my mood. My family could see that I was different, but they didn't know why. I didn't know what I didn't know. What I needed before these experiences is called psychoeducation. I also would not accept the help because of the powerful stigma that I felt about mental health. I felt that self-stigma in two specific ways. The first way was a stigma about my mental health struggles. I did not want to admit to myself that I was having problems with my mental health. Such problems were for crazy people, not for me. Although I wasn't even honest with myself about my symptoms, I would have rather suffered from continual symptoms of a psychological injury than admit that I was experiencing problems with my mental health. The second way that the stigma impacted me was a stigma about getting help for my mental health. I can now see those as two distinct things. The stigma of our experiences and the stigma about treatment for those experiences. Even after I overcame my denial about my mental health symptoms, I was still not willing to overcome my stigma about getting help for my mental health. I had the option to receive psychological treatment and support, confidentially and for free, but I still refused. I hoped that things would just get better on their own. I chose to mask my symptoms by escaping through avoidant behavior. During the time when I was unable to work and on stress leave, I was encouraged by Sanjay, one of my closest friends, to journal about my thoughts and feelings. I had so much trust in Sanjay that I decided to try it. He said that I should write him an email and treat it as journaling. He said that I didn't even need to hit send because the act of writing the words would be good for me. The first time that I wrote up my thoughts, I wrote for nearly 4 hours. Tears kept pouring down my face. I could barely stop crying the whole time. I wrote about the pain that I still carried from the calls that I had attended. I wrote about the pain that I felt from events in my personal life, like the suicide of my godfather Bill, with whom I had lived at the time of his death. I wrote about what I had experienced as I tried to make meaning out of my experiences. I never wanted anyone to read it. I wasn't even sure that I was going to hit send to Sanjay as I was writing it. But now, 7 years later, I don't feel any shame about my experiences anymore. In fact, I have learned that the best way that I can support other people with their own mental health is to share my own struggles and the lessons that I was forced to learn along the way. I have 40 pages of journaling from March and April of 2016 when I emailed back and forth with Sanjay. In them, I share the details of my hardest moments. They were the details that I felt ashamed about. It was the thoughts that I was worried other people would judge me for having. I'm taking those moments and sharing them in this book to reduce mental health stigma. I'm shining a light into my darkest places because I know that it will help others. Here is a part of what I wrote. Last night, I was thinking about a call I went to where a guy shot himself. He was dead before we got there. It didn't it didn't feel like a big deal at the time. I think he probably came to the call. I don't actually have any gory memories in mind when I picture that call. I can picture him wrapped in a blanket with a gun in it with him. I see some blood, but don't picture blood everywhere or some gross crimes. I think the thing that sticks with me about that call is some of the choices that man made. He chose to end his life. I don't think that affects me much. I've been around a bunch of that. But he chose to have us come find him instead of his family. It hits me harder when people are found by those they love. Here's a part of the reason why. My godfather Bill killed himself. I was the last person that he talked to. I was home when he did it, at the house, but I didn't. A couple times I debated talking to Bill and telling him that I was there for him, but I never did. I carry so much regret about it. I don't think it would have made any difference in the long run. He had lots of people he could have talked to, but maybe, and there absolutely is a chance, if I talked to him that morning, he would have actually talked to me. Maybe I could have suggested taking my dog for a walk, and it could have changed. I don't think about it all the time, but when suicide comes up, it makes me sick. I was really upset on my mental health instructor course when they mentioned that a police officer had just killed himself. I had to go for a walk, and I was pretty close to breaking down. I found that so sad, which it is. It made me think a lot about Bill. I went for a workout at the park that day, shortly after Bill died, but of course, I didn't know that. When I came back, I saw 4 police cruisers, an ambulance, and a fire truck outside my house. I saw a police officer walk out the front door, and I asked if Bill and Janet were all right. He said, "I'll let you talk to Janet." I turned to my friend Kyle and said, "Oh my God, I think Bill's dead." Janet came out shortly after. She was so distraught. They were married for probably 45 years. She told me about the moment when she found him after his suicide. She told me that she was screaming for me to help her, that I never came. It makes me feel really sad that I wasn't there. I know that's not my fault, but it doesn't always matter. I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it, and I know that. It's making me really sad just typing all this out. I find it so hard when people kill themselves, and then their family has to find them and be even more traumatized. It's bad enough when that gets passed on to a stranger, but it breaks my heart to see it get passed on to a family member. I've had some calls like that over the years. I had another call where a man died from a suicide at home. I knew him from when I was a kid. He had a son my age that I grew up with, went to school with. He also had some other kids, younger kids. His young daughter is the one that found him in their house. That made me so sad. I was the first officer on scene that day. I stayed as the lead investigator, even though I knew him. That probably wasn't a great idea. I remember talking to his family that day. I felt sad for them. I really feel sad for them. That was another day. It still makes me sad when I think about it. Some of those experiences have made me more in touch with my emotions, or I guess you could say emotional. You never know when you might get in a car crash. You never know if you'll get sick or have a heart attack. So you better live for this moment and enjoy today. Tell people that you love them or how much they mean to you. I don't want to have to feel like I need to filter my feelings. I know I'm more open to being vulnerable than most people, and I'm okay with that. I have been for a long time. I think it's because I have a lot of confidence, and I don't care if someone doesn't like it or me. If they don't, they can fuck right off, because I like me, and so do lots of other good people. But that's just my own self perception. Who knows what other people think? It made me really sad when I was writing about Bill. I was crying quite a bit. It always makes me sad when I think about it. I don't know how Janet still lives in the same house and sleeps in the same bed. No fucking way I could do that, or would want to. I'm really close with Janet. I go up and give her a hug fairly often. I even just ask her how her day went or what she's up to. Sometimes I'll invite her for a walk with the dog, or I'll even make her dinner. I hope that it helps her to not feel as lonely. I really hope that writing about this stuff helps me to get some more closure on it. I don't like to get upset about it. I don't like to think about it. Maybe that means I've never dealt with it properly. I probably haven't. There were even some signs about his suicide earlier on. I remember Bill came and gave me this old, stupid, shitty book. I had no interest in this book. It was the whole giving away possessions thing before suicide. Now that I understand it, if I ever see this again, I'm going to be screaming bloody murder and super concerned about someone. But at the time, I just thought, why the fuck are you giving me this stupid book that I have no interest in and will never, ever read? The polite thing to do is just to say thank you and put it on my bookshelf. So that's what I did. Some things you need to learn by experiencing. Thanks for listening again. I don't really know what else to do. Journaling about my experience helped me to change my thought patterns, including how I judged myself for feeling this emotional pain. It helped having Sanjay respond to my emails to challenge my thoughts that weren't helpful. Eventually, this helped me to change how I viewed myself and my experiences. It took me years of intentionally challenging how I viewed myself before I was finally able to process my emotions and to move forward in my life. Eventually, I started telling myself, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I had to keep repeating it to myself for a long time. I didn't believe it. Even though I thought I was broken, I thought I was weak, I was wrong. But I didn't know that. I was suffering from a psychological injury, but I didn't even know what was happening to me. I felt a stigma about my mental health crisis. I didn't understand it at the time, but what I was doing was changing my own mindset around my experiences and my symptoms of traumatic stress injury. I've spent 4 years writing this book to share what I learned because I had to learn it in such a hard way. I didn't write any journaling to share with you. I didn't study these topics to teach them to you. I was doing this because it was what I needed. Only as I started to heal myself did I see how badly this was needed by so many police officers and so many people outside of policing. I didn't have any positional authority to make changes to police training, so I decided to spend years of my life writing this book. The information in this book was crucial for me in my recovery, and now I'm sharing it with as many people as possible because I want to help others based on what I have learned. Stigma reduction needed. After many hard years of working on myself, I realized what I needed early in my career had been stigma reduction. I needed experienced officers that I respected to normalize the reactions that I was having and to normalize getting help for those symptoms. I needed stigma reduction in coordination with psychological education about resources and treatments for the psychological injury that I had. Many of these treatments are backed by peer-reviewed scientific research. There's overwhelming evidence to show that the treatments are effective at helping people who are willing to access. I've spent over 16 years in law enforcement, with almost 10 years on the emergency response team, ERT, often referred to as SWAT. I have been a peer-to-peer support member, 8 years, and a Road to Mental Readiness, R2MR, instructor for dozens of mental health training sessions. I am also a reintegration facilitator to help members return after critical incidents and am part of our proactive response support team, which facilitates stigma reduction and psychoeducation through a peer support program. These experiences have provided me with a personal lived experience on these topics, which you will see in the stories that I share. These experiences have also shown me the similarities in the experiences of many other officers who have dealt with similar symptoms. We have often felt like we had to do it alone. I have also studied the literature from experts on the topic that I'm writing. This started as I completed my master's degree in leadership with a focus on police culture and the impacts on police officer mental health. I've read many books, academic journal articles, and firsthand accounts of officers through podcasts and storytelling. I've spent countless hours learning from researchers who've spent decades trying to become the best in their fields. I want to provide the lessons that I have learned through this research in an easy to digest way. I have combined this research with stories of my lived experiences, along with the lessons that I learned the hard way. The research is clear. Stigma reduction in the police profession and in first responder culture is needed on an urgent priority basis. A psychological injury does not need to be a death sentence. The 2019 Ontario Coroner's Report into the death of 9 police officers by suicide directly calls for a need to normalize mental health through the reduction of stigma. Here's how we do that. We take our abnormal reactions to abnormal events and we make them normal. I wasn't weak, I was human. I wasn't broken, I was injured. I wasn't a victim of my PTSD diagnosis anymore. I had some control over my healing journey. After my return to work, I became a peer-to-peer support member. This peer support role meant that I was responsible for supporting other officers with their mental. I allowed myself to be vulnerable and shared my experiences with other officers. The typical response was, I've never experienced anything like that. Except for that one time when seeing my kid kept reminding me of that child sex assault victim. I just couldn't stop crying after that next of kin notification. I don't know what was wrong with me. I kept going to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. The test showed it was actually an anxiety attack. Or sometimes, yes, multiple times I hear, my wife told me that she was going to leave me if I didn't get help for my PTSD. We're often left to believe that something is wrong with us, instead of understanding that something has happened to us. Shared silent suffering. I started to recognize what many of us had similar experiences as police officers, that we didn't talk openly about them. We denied we had them, or worse, we judged ourselves for having them. Many of us were left to wonder, what's wrong with me? It was the same thing that I had wondered about myself. Once I started to open up, there was a sense of understanding and connection in the shared experience that we had been through. It felt good to talk to someone who could understand part of my experience. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone in what I had experienced. I began instructing mental health training sessions for the Road to Mental Readiness, R2MR program. During these sessions, I would share parts of my personal experience with mental health. I expected that people would judge me like I had judged myself. What I found instead was connection and acceptance. After every class, there would be a line of people waiting to talk to me. Many described their connections to my experiences of rage, emotional pain, and nightmares. I often heard the following response: that thing you went through, that was just like me. I went through that too. Not specific to policing. This topic isn't unique to policing. Many other professions, such as firefighters, corrections, military, dispatchers, paramedics, medical personnel, court staff, veterinarians, and social workers, also face similar challenges with trauma, emotional pain, and shift work. Most of us were taught how to do the job, but not how to process the impacts that come with it. Although this book is written with a focus on what I needed as a new police officer, it is applicable to the struggles that people will endure other professions too. Most of the lessons in this book are universal aspects of life that can be beneficial to everyone, but I've shared the lessons directed at what I needed as a new police officer. This was intentional because if you write the book for everyone, you can end up with a book that doesn't help anyone. I didn't do the journaling because I wanted you to read it. I never would have written a word if I thought you would read it. However, now that I've healed from my experiences, I want to share it because that is the best way that I can help reduce the stigma around mental health. That is the best form of prevention and protection that I can provide to those who will come across similar problems. Stigma. My primary goal with this book is to reduce the stigma around mental health. Stigma reduction is crucial both within policing and within society. It is such a crucial topic that I have made it the title of the book and the first topic after the introduction. Taking intentional action to reduce stigma is something that we can all choose to do. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to share the hardest moments of their mental health experience. It can be as simple as how we talk about the topic. It can be how we treat people when they experience these type of challenges. It can even be challenging our own internal thoughts when we are dealing with our own self-stigma about our experiences. Reducing stigma gets easier after other people have reduced the stigma beforehand. One person who helped reduce the stigma for me was retired General Romeo Dallaire, who shared his mental health battle in his book, Waiting for First Light. Retired Sergeant Michael Segru also shared his own struggles as a police officer in his recent book, Relentless Courage. I want to express my appreciation for those who've had the courage to be vulnerable, which helped me to change my own thoughts around my experiences. Many others have shared their own experiences with me on a personal level as I've gone through my own experiences. When I felt alone and broken, courageous people reached out to tell me about what they had been through. I want to express my appreciation for those who have courageously reduced the mental health stigma for me by acknowledging the positive impacts that it has had on me. I can't pay them back for what they did, so I'll pay it forward instead to help reduce stigma for other people. Neuroplasticity. My second goal is to help people understand neuroplasticity and use it to their advantage. Neuroplasticity means that your brain can and will adapt, just like the rest of your body adapts. We can all understand what will happen if you lift heavy weights every day, or if you run 24 miles every week. Your body will change and adapt to the type of stress you expose it to. Your brain's like that too. Your brain is designed to adapt to your environment. The connections of the neurons in your brain can change. Some of the changes to your brain will be outside of your control. When I experienced my first suicide by cop attempt, when someone tried to get me to kill them as a police officer, it changed my brain. At first, I didn't have any control of it. My brain started replaying lethal force decisions repeatedly in my dreams. I would relive the same feelings that I had experienced during the actual call, which were emotionally charged and painful. I didn't control those feelings. They just happened to me for years, often occurring multiple times per night. But then I was able to take back some control. I stopped drinking, which stopped the interference that the alcohol was having with my sleep patterns. Unbeknown to me, the interference in my sleep patterns was making my nightmares worse. I started writing down my nightmares in a journal next to my bed. I started journaling about my experiences. I started seeing a professional psychologist for help. Each of those things was hard for me to do in the moment. I felt a powerful resistance. I wasn't willing to try that because I felt like those were only things for crazy people. After many years of suffering, my brain started to change for the better. My brain started to heal as I started doing things to help it heal. I want to share what I have learned through healing my own brain to provide you with strategies that can help prevent your suffering from a psychological injury for years. To do this, I will share with you what I learned about the brain and how it works. I'll relate that to my own experiences of high stress and emotional pain as a police officer and member of an emergency response. I will share the things that I did to help my recovery. I will also share my summaries of the research of experts in their field, which support those healthy coping strategies. One of those experts is Professor Andrew Huberman, who studies neurobiology and shares his insights on his podcast, The Huberman Lab. He explains that there is self-directed neuroplasticity. You get some control over your ability to change your nervous system and your brain. He provides two specific ways that you can do that. First is a deliberate focus on the thing that you're trying to learn. The second method is sleep and non-sleep deep rest, which is when actual neural rewiring occurs. Sleep is so crucial to your mental health that I've dedicated an entire chapter to sleep science in chapter 10. I also heard Dr. Alexandra Jabber describe the possibility of neuroplasticity at Dan Sun's 2023 Peer Recovery and Resiliency Symposium. Dr. Jabber, who is a paramedic who also completed her PhD, she said that trauma is reversible and that trauma of all types can be healed at all times. She described a process of reprogramming our subconscious minds, as over 90% of what happens in our brain takes place at a subconscious level. She's right, but the first step is believing that we can change our brains and our minds intentionally. Cultural change. My third goal with this book is to create cultural change within the policing profession. I have focused specifically on police culture for several reasons, while also hoping that this has a secondary impact on our larger culture as well. However, policing has unique cultural elements, and it is what I have experienced. It is also what I have studied while completing my master's. As I'll explain in chapter 5, the simplest definition of culture is how we do things around here. Culture is carried within the people of that culture and is passed down from the experienced people to the new members. But culture is not fixed. It changes us as people, and we can change it. I want to help create positive change within the policing culture by reducing the mental health stigma and by providing a guide to the psychological challenges of police work. I want to share my experience of harmful coping strategies and how I started to heal as I changed. Coping strategies. Drinking alcohol excessively is one form of coping strategy called passive coping. It's maladaptive, just a fancy way of saying that it doesn't help and makes things worse. Passive coping generally involves things like avoiding our problems, which tend to get worse. Policing culture has historically passed on passive coping strategies, such as numbing your feelings with alcohol and using dark humor to lessen the impact of the suffering of others. When I reference passive coping strategies, it is just a formal term meant to describe unhealthy coping strategies. Active coping strategies are more beneficial in the long term. They are the term used to describe healthy coping strategies. These include problem solving, seeking information, seeking professional help, reframing experiences. I have experienced the hardship of passive coping for many years, and I've seen the benefit of active coping strategies in my own life. I want to replace hurtful coping strategies with more helpful coping strategies by talking about how I learned the lesson the hard way. I was able to see the benefits of journaling to express my negative emotions and release my emotional pain. I have learned the benefits of seeing a psychologist, which also helped me move forward from my psychological injury. I learned how to better understand and work with my own mind and body so that I could gain more control over what was happening to me. And this was fundamental to my recovery. Lastly, I was able to reframe my experiences so that I could make meaning from those experiences, which helped me to move forward. Psychological education. I would love it if everyone had the time and interest to read this book from cover to cover. But we are all different, and so are our needs. I wrote this book as chapters with lessons on individual topics. The story is designed to help you remember parts of the lesson that I want to convey. It's easy to remember stories, but it's hard to remember facts. Stories are engaging, but facts can be boring. Stories move us emotionally, whereas statistics remove the emotional context from the facts. As such, you'll find that each chapter starts with a brief story. Some of them are about calls for service that I attended as a police officer. Some of them are about other parts of my life. They're all designed to help you remember the lessons that I describe after the story about the topic. These are the lessons that I wish someone had taught me when I was young. It is important to understand that we cannot change what happens to us. We can choose to let go of things that have hurt us. We often suffer for much longer than we must because we're afraid to confront that pain. We can also find meaning in what we have experienced. Finding purpose or meaning is a protective factor from the hardships that we will experience in life. For example, using my own suffering to help others has brought me to a tremendous sense of purpose and meaning in my own life. So thank you for taking the time to read this book. You have helped me to find meaning in the pain that I have experienced. Now let's get started reducing mental health stigma. Join me as I set my sights on stigma.